Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are angry that this government is gathering their personal financial information without their consent. Canadians were never told that this was happening. We learned it through the media. And that shows how much confidence the Prime Minister has in his policies. There's only one thing that Canadians want to hear from the Prime Minister now. Will he be cancelling this project, and when will he do it? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government takes the protection of Canadians' privacy seriously, as does StatsCan. In fact, Statistics Canada has communicated with the Privacy Commissioner on this pilot project. We all understand the importance of accurate data for Canadians, and that is why we have confidence in Statistics Canada to gather the data properly while working alongside the Privacy Commissioner. And in that way, Canadians' privacy will always be protected. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Doing this because they got caught. Yeah. Stats Canada wasn't consulting with the Privacy Commissioner for the 15 years that they were raiding Canadians' private financial data. That's what Canadians are concerned about. He's not protecting their rights, he's violating them. Will he do the right thing and stop this practice?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in 2015, we campaigned on a promise to restore the long-form census. And the arguments the Conservative Party made in the years up to the cancellation of the long-form census are exactly the same arguments they're making today about Statistics Canada. Trumped-up arguments about protection of privacy when they know, and indeed all Canadians should know, that Statistics Canada works with the Privacy Commissioner, respects and protects the privacy of Canadians, and we will continue to ensure that the privacy of Canadians is always protected.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What the Prime Minister fails to understand is that these are not arguments put forward by the Conservative Party. These are the concerns of Canadians who don't want their financial information raided by this government. Now, here's what the BC Freedom of Information and Privacy Association had to say. Quote, "It is untenable to give absolute trust and authority to a government agency in today's technological landscape." We're not talking about a census, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about the government getting line-by-line financial data. Does the Prime Minister believe that that's okay?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, then allow me to speak directly to Canadians to reassure them that we are protecting the privacy of their data. We are working with the Privacy Commissioner, whose job it is to ensure that the privacy of Canadians is always protected. We understand the need for reliable data, unlike the members opposite, but we also always put at the forefront the protection of Canadians' privacy. That's why this data that Statistics Canada collects is anonymized, is subject to stringent controls, and indeed, this is the pilot project they are working on now that hasn't even rolled out yet, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, what they put at the forefront is money intended to settle lawsuits because of data breaches.
Exactly.
Now, when it comes to the carbon tax, there are reports that this government intends to charge HST and GST on top of the carbon tax. Can the Prime Minister confirm today, yes or no, will HST and GST be applied to the carbon tax?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we've seen over the past weeks is the Conservatives continue to try and find new angles to muddy the waters on a basic fact. We are choosing to put a price on pollution because we think there's too much pollution, and by putting a price on it, there will be less of it. That is our plan, Mr. Speaker, and we're happy to defend our plan. What's interesting, Mr. Speaker, is the Conservatives refuse to put forward their plan, or they simply have no intention of putting forward a plan to fight climate change, and what Canadians want to know is where is their plan?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, only a Liberal would believe that a simple yes or no question could be muddying the waters. The HST and GST will either be collected on the carbon tax or it won't. The Prime Minister can tell Canadians right now if he will be applying HST and GST on his carbon tax? Yes or no?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been laying out the details of our approach on pricing pollution now, not just for the past few weeks that we've been announced the details of it, but over the past...
Order. I'm having trouble hearing the answer. It's important to hear the answer because if members want me to look for things that are unparliamentary or out of order, I have to be able to hear, of course. And, of course, most members and all parties are able to sit through a question period and hear things they don't like without interrupting. So I'd ask the rest to join that majority. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's very simple. Climate change represents perhaps the greatest global threat we are facing as a species. We have a plan to address the impacts of climate change, both by growing our economy, by protecting our families, and by protecting the environment. The Conservatives have no plan, and will try all sorts of different ways to distract from the fact they have no plan. We will fight climate change.
Honourable.
Won't seem to have heard what I said a moment ago. I remind them not to interrupt. The standing order is prohibited.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Les-Basques.
I do remember a Conservative government that for 5 years was unable to give a yes or a no answer. This Liberal government, though, is disappointing one community after another, and this time it's veterans. This government has let a total of $1,037 million that was promised to the pension programs of our veterans simply lapse. Yesterday, this House unanimously approved a motion from my esteemed colleague from Courtenay Alberni to reallocate the entirety of the funds to veterans programs, but Liberals are refusing to do just that. Is the Prime Minister ready to implement the motion of the NDP and finally spend the entirety of the budget promised to our veterans?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government is and continues to be committed to supporting and honouring Canada's veterans and their families. Unlike the previous government, we ensure that the necessary funding is made available to veterans when and where they need it. And that is why we were happy to support the NDP's motion yesterday. What the Conservatives did in office was cut services for veterans, including service offices, to create a fake balanced budget for the election. In 3 years, we have increased financial supports by over $10 billion, putting more money in veterans' pockets, increasing mental health supports, and are delivering on the promises we made to veterans and their families.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Les-Basques.
See them backed by actions.
Hear, hear.
Aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, today more than 400 prominent people have co-signed the Quebec Pact for Ecological Transition. Civil society is committed to serious action to fight climate change. An emergency debate was recently held in this House following the report by the IPCC. Despite that, the Liberal government continues to think that words are worth more than action. Does the Prime Minister plan to listen to this appeal from Quebecers, and will he finally put in place concrete policies to fight climate change? The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
In a second, but I can't let that lie, Mr. Speaker, because we have been taking concrete action on standing up for our veterans. Whether it's $10 billion for veterans programs and services, whether it's raising financial supports for veterans and their caregivers, whether it's investing in a continuum of mental health services or expanding a range of services available to the families of medically released veterans or reopening the 9 sheltered offices, we have done nothing but act on our veterans. And on the same time, Mr. Speaker, nous agissons de façon...
We are taking action to fight climate change with a plan that puts a price on pollution, that will show leadership across the world on how we can counter climate change while creating good jobs and economic growth.
For Essex.
This Prime Minister doesn't even seem to care about signing away Canadian jobs by signing on to the USMCA. This government has failed to ensure aluminum and steel tariffs were lifted, risking the loss of at least 6,000 jobs of people who are here on Parliament Hill today. Aluminum workers from Kitimat to Saguenay are desperately trying to defend their jobs, families and communities. Why won't this Liberal government listen to workers' call and tell the U.S. administration that they won't ratify the USMCA until Trump drops his illegal tariffs?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the member's first statement in that we know that the USMCA is creating and securing good jobs for Canadians right across this country. But if she doesn't believe me, allow me to read the quote from the NDP member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. To the Canadian negotiators, he said, "I just want to congratulate everybody in this room for the fantastic job that you did." Then he said that the USMCA is the best deal possible to protect workers all around this country. We agree with the member from Rosemont-Petite.
Alors, honorable député, alors,
Order.
honorable député de Rosemont-Petite-Patrie.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie.
Is anyone surprised that Liberals don't want to talk about workers who are losing their jobs? Dairy farmers are not happy. Medication prices are going to explode. And steel and aluminum workers can't believe this government signed a deal that continues to put their job at risk. Aluminum workers from Unifor are here today on the Hill asking this Prime Minister not to sign the USMCA until tariffs are off the table. What is the Prime Minister is going to tell those workers right here, right here?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see a situation in which the NDP says one thing in this House, but says another thing behind closed doors.
I can say that the member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie said that the USMCA was the best deal possible. He admitted that it would protect workers across the country. We know that we will always protect workers. That's what we told the steel and aluminum workers. It's what we told workers in dairy, and it's what we're telling workers across the country, and that is what we will do, Mr. Speaker.
Instead, I have to remind the member for New Westminster, Burnaby, and some others near him not to interrupt when someone else has the floor. I appreciate his agreement to that. Honorable député de Richmond-Athabasca.
The honourable member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, for 2 weeks now, the Prime Minister has been bent on supporting the collection of confidential and personal data of 500,000 Canadians without their consent. The Privacy Commissioner is investigating it so troublesome. A petition has been put in place, and there are now more than 19,000 people who've signed it and who are calling to an end to this procedure. Will the Prime Minister finally listen to Canadians and immediately put an end to this serious intrusion into people's privacy? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we take the protection of Canadians' privacy very seriously, as does StatsCan. In fact, Statistics Canada has contacted the Privacy Commissioner regarding this private project, which has not yet been launched. We will continue to work to ensure that the privacy of Canadians remains a priority for StatsCan and for our government. I must point out that those same arguments about Canadians' privacy that the Conservatives used to eliminate the long-term census, that was a decision that was very disappointing for Canadians. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister repeats the same old song, here's what Canadians really think. Aline, what is the government getting involved in? Don't they understand what confidential and private mean? Marcel, it's sad to see the way we're being led by the Prime Minister's government. Catherine, it's totally unacceptable. I'm opposed to this way of doing things. There are huge risks. It's intrusive. Messages like that are coming in by the hundreds. So I will repeat my question for the Prime Minister for the 12th time. Will he listen to Canadians and put an immediate end to this intrusion? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, allow me to directly reassure Canadians, contrary to what the Conservatives are telling them, to make them afraid. We will always protect the privacy of Canadians. We are working with the Commissioner, the Privacy Commissioner, to ensure that all data is anonymized, that the data is controlled, that there is no risk of the information being shared. Canadians can rest assured that this government will always protect their privacy.
For Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to wake up to understand that Canadians reject the government's support of Stats Canada's harvest of deeply personal financial data without asking permission. Canadians realize that Europeans this year have new privacy laws that prohibit this sort of privacy exposure without the specific consent of clients. Mr. Speaker, why won't the Prime Minister accept that Canadians own all of their personal information, financial or otherwise, that they should decide whether that data is shared or not?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if you remember well, in the years leading up to the 2015 election, we heard Conservatives making these arguments left, right and centre about the need to protect Canadians from the intrusiveness of Statistics Canada. Well, Canadians rejected that approach by the Conservatives, and there were celebrations across the country when the very first thing we did was restore the long-form census at Statistics Canada, so that decisions could be based on evidence and data and not ideology. We will always protect Canadians' privacy and do it.
Honourable Member for Central Okanagan's Milkmean Nickel.
I really hope the Prime Minister would tell that to the 27 million Canadians whose information was compelled by a credit bureau to Statistics Canada that is contrary to what he said without any of their consent, Mr. Speaker. Now, these Liberals don't seem to understand that the personal information of Canadians does not belong to the government. They believe they have the right to know what everyone is doing with their finances all the time. Now, on this side of the House, we believe that access to that kind of information requires consent. No consent, Mr. Speaker, no data. Why is this Prime Minister still refusing to listen to Canadians who want this program cancelled?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, these are the same arguments they made about Statistics Canada compelling people to fill out the long-form census. Well, in 2015, in that election, Canadians spoke loudly and clearly, rejected the Conservative vision of policies based on ideology rather than on evidence and data. We will not engage in the kind of fear-mongering they are trying to do around Canadians and their data, because we can state unequivocally to Canadians that we continue to protect their data. We continue to understand how important it is to work with the Privacy Commissioner to ensure that happens.
Honourable Member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has just clearly said that it's their #1 priority to protect Canadians' data. Perhaps he'd like to explain to us today why Canada Post allowed a breach of 4,500 cannabis purchasers in Ontario, their private data, their credit card numbers. That was just hacked within the government that he says protects Canadians' privacy. Would he like to explain to us exactly how that happened?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, like I said, our government takes very seriously the protection of Canadians' information from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, modification, transmittal, or disposal. Security measures are in place, and their compliance is ensured through routine inspection of sites and systems where sensitive information and assets are processed or stored. An issue that came up between the Ontario Cannabis Store and Canada Post was flagged, was fixed, and Canadians can be sure that will not happen moving forward.
Allah. Order. The Honourable Member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That pre-written apology that the Prime Minister just gave moments ago will be cold comfort to any Canadian whose private financial data could be hacked in the future. This government cannot protect the privacy data. And when the Prime Minister indicates that it's the long-form census that is the reason why Canadians are in favor, or against rather, the removal of their data from their banks. The reality is there's a big difference. In the long-form census, they voluntarily gave their information. In StatsCan, they're ripping it out of their bank accounts. Prime Minister, will Prime Minister stop this action?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see how short the Conservatives' memories are. The issue they had was that the long-form census was mandatory, Mr. Speaker, not voluntary. That is why they eliminated the long-form census and why we campaigned on a promise to respect Statistics Canada, to ensure that we protected Canadians' privacy every step of the way, but to ensure that data be the foundation for evidence-based policy, that we work in a way that protects Canadians and delivers to them the services they need, as opposed to what the Conservatives wanted to do and eliminate the long-form census and Statistics Canada.
Honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government chose their method of measuring poverty. With that calculation, poverty for seniors on paper moves from 14.2% down to 4.9%. With the cost of medication, housing, and medical supplies, this calculation has not made life 1 cent more affordable for them. The government's poverty reduction plan is a document with no action. Now, thousands of seniors living in poverty may be excluded from the very definition. Why is the government trying to manipulate numbers to hide the actual poverty rate in Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, our focus on the national poverty reduction strategy is actually about clarifying the data and really being able to go after what is the problem that is facing so many Canadians. Because thanks to investments in programs like the Canada Child Benefit, the National Housing Strategy, Enhanced Seniors Benefits, and the Canada's Workers Benefit, we are on track to lift 650,000 Canadians out of poverty, however you define it, Mr. Speaker. With Canada's first National Poverty Reduction Strategy and our Poverty Reduction Act, we have a plan to ensure every Canadian has a real and fair chance to succeed.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' Poverty Reduction Act would have been the perfect opportunity to implement a universal childcare system, a universal program for prescription drugs and dental care, housing for all. It would have been the perfect opportunity to improve income support programs and to ensure that EI is accessible to all. Unfortunately, this strategy, a person who is poor today, will be even poorer in 2020. So when will the Liberals put these measures in place to actually and really reduce poverty? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are growing the middle class by helping people working hard to join it. With the CCB, for example, the National Housing Strategy, Enhanced Seniors Benefits, and the Canada Workers Benefit, we are in the process of lifting 650,000 people out of poverty. With the first National Poverty Reduction Strategy and our Poverty Reduction Act, we have a plan so that all Canadians have a real and fair chance of succeeding. We have a great deal of work that remains to be done, but we are on the right track, Mr. Speaker.
Carleton.
When the Prime Minister told Canadians that he would take $10 in carbon taxes from them for every $9 in rebates he returned and make them somehow better off, they were understandably suspicious. Now they're learning that that original $10 in upfront taxes might not include the HST on the tax. That is a tax on the tax. His finance minister refused to confirm whether that was the case. So, yes or no, will the HST apply on the carbon tax?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, we see the lengths to which the Conservatives will go to try and distract from the fact that they do not have a plan to fight climate change. On this side of the House, and indeed Canadians across the country, recognize that climate change is the greatest global threat facing us all. We need a concrete plan to act against climate change, and we have done exactly that by putting a price on pollution, by moving forward on investments in innovation and the clean economy, while at the same time supporting Canadian families through this transition to a cleaner economy. That's our plan, Mr. Speaker. What's theirs?
Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, they don't have an environment plan. They have a plan to raise taxes, Mr. Speaker. They already said they're going to collect more in tax revenue than they're going to give back in rebates. But now we're learning that that upfront tax might actually be taxed again through the HST, a tax on a tax. None of their documents reveal whether in fact that is true. None of their ministers have admitted the truth on the question. The Prime Minister can tell us now, will the HST apply on the carbon tax, yes or no?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, has been pointed out, we are the first generation to see the solution to this problem of climate change and the last generation to actually be able to act on it. On this side of the House, we have put forward a concrete plan that puts a price on pollution because there's too much pollution, and if you put a price on it, you will reduce the amount of pollution. It is something that Canadians understand at the same time as we will be supporting them to be able to succeed through this transition to a cleaner economy. That is our plan, Mr. Speaker. They have no plan. They will not talk about that.
Well, member for Carleton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he is the first person to raise taxes and the last person to tell the truth about it. So let's give him another opportunity to do so. He admits that he's going to collect more in taxes than he gives back in rebates. Now we're hearing that they might actually charge HST on the tax, a tax on the tax. So yes or no, will the HST apply on the carbon tax?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, they are circling around the issue of whether or not there is a crisis that we have to deal with. For 10 years, the Conservative government, of which that member was a key member, refused to actually take any action on fighting climate change. We know that the time to act is now, and that's exactly what we are doing. We are putting a price on pollution while we are helping families through this transition towards a cleaner economy. That's our plan, Mr. Speaker. They have none.
The member for Carleton. Order.
Circling around, well, he's actually circling around the taxpayer. He reaches into one pocket and then he circles around the other side to reach into the other pocket. They're going to raise taxes on gas, groceries, home heating, and other essentials Canadians require to survive. But now we're hearing they might actually charge the HST on the tax itself. Can you imagine that? A tax on the tax. Will he deny that then, if he can't admit, will he deny that he is going to put a tax on his tax?
There we go.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives would prefer to play rhetorical games to try and distract from the fact that they do not think that climate change is a real crisis to our country or our communities, and this, despite the wildfires, the floods, the droughts, the hurricanes in our neighbors to the south. These are challenges that we all know are real, and they are playing rhetorical games to try and distract from the fact that they have no plan to fight climate change.
Order. There's far too much noise. Order. The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, speaking about being serious about addressing climate change, the Liberals promised to remove perverse fossil fuel subsidies. They claim their carbon tax will drive the shift to cleaner energy sources and promise to shut down coal power. Yet they propose to subsidize coal by virtually exempting them from the carbon tax. This will delay coal plant retirements, disincent any shift to renewables, even cleaner gas, and allow harmful pollutants impacting health. Why is this government undermining the efforts by provinces like Alberta, who've shown leadership in earlier shutdown of coal power?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our plan to fight climate change includes phasing out coal power plants by 2030. We know that is an essential part of it, and I want to highlight again the fact that we're able to move forward to reach our targets is partially because Alberta has chosen to put an absolute cap on its oil sands emissions. We are moving forward with a comprehensive, responsible plan to fight climate change while we create jobs and grow the economy. But of course, the NDP don't think we're going far enough. The Conservatives can't believe that we're actually doing something because they don't think we should do anything to fight climate change. We are doing the things that Canadians expect, growing the economy, protecting the environment.
The honourable member for Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Hey, quick question for this pipeline-owning Prime Minister. How's that sale going on the $4.5 billion gem of an oil pipeline he picked up? What? No buyers? Is that why he's rushing the sale to sell off an asset that Canadians spent $500 million in 2018 to build? Well, it's good the government is offering 5% to local First Nations. Two critical questions remain. Given what just happened to Rona workers, will this Prime Minister guarantee that not a single worker will lose their job at Ridley Terminals? And will he also promise that no foreign government will be allowed to buy this strategic asset?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our approach on growing the economy and protecting the environment together is something that Canadians understand right across the country. As we move forward with a concrete plan to fight climate change while making sure that we're investing in the kinds of infrastructures and opportunities to get our resources to new markets other than the United States, we are doing what Canadians expect. We will continue to focus on both growing the economy and protecting Canadians' future generations in our environmental protections, but also with good jobs for the long term.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
You won't be surprised, Mr. Speaker, to know that, like your constituents, Canadians in St. John's East depend on the health and safety of our oceans. Oceans are at the core of who we are as Newfoundlanders. And Canadians across the country are so proud that our government is investing in the health of our oceans with a $1.5 billion Oceans Protection Plan. Today is a big day, Mr. Speaker. On the 2-year anniversary of the Oceans Protection Plan, can the Prime Minister share some of the accomplishments that have been made possible by this $1.5 billion investment?
Great question. Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member from St. John's East for his hard work to protect coastal communities like his own. Today, we are proud to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of the Oceans Protection Plan, which includes over $138 million for Newfoundland and Labrador. We are establishing 24/7 capacity in the Coast Guard's 3 regional operation centres in Victoria, Montreal and St. John's to ensure that our waterways and Canadians remain safe. We will continue to invest, protect and support Canadians living in coastal communities from coast to coast to coast.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Laperouse. Mr. Speaker, the government's going to save a lot of money on the backs of our veterans with their new Veterans Pension Plan. Even if the government says it's going to cost them billions, even if the Liberals say that they're going to increase services, even if they have humiliated Mr. Bourrier, a highly respected veteran, and he was right, veterans will have less money in their pockets. When will the Prime Minister tell them the truth? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the financial well-being of veterans is a priority for us. We are investing $10 billion in new funds for veterans. We will honour our promise to have, so that they can have the option of a for-life pension. We will increase the amount that is not taxable instead of a lump sum payment, and costs will be over a longer period of time. We're investing in order to better support our veterans.
Mr. Speaker, I believe the last time that this Prime Minister spoke directly to a veteran was when he told him they are asking for more than he can give. The Liberals have been claiming that they've been spending more money on veterans, and we know that's not true. In fact, the Prime Minister is cutting $500 million worth of benefits from our veterans. Canadian veterans, like Sean Bourrier, have been calling the Liberal pension scheme a shell game ever since they discovered the details. We're set to shut him up. The Liberals are taking this veteran to court for simply exposing the truth. Why?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons on how we treat our veterans from the Conservative government that nickel and dime them every step of the way while wrapping themselves in the flag and at the same time shutting down the very service centres that served our veterans in their times of need. Since 2016, we have invested $10 billion for veterans programs and services. We've raised financial supports for veterans and caregivers. We've supported a continuum of mental health services. We've expanded the range of services available to the families of medically released veterans. We have increased by $42.8 million the service.
Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
In 2015, the Prime Minister stood in Belleville with veterans as a backdrop, including some from his own caucus wearing their medals, and said, "We will immediately reinstate lifelong pensions." Veterans understood that to mean the type of pension that existed before the new Veterans Charter. We now know that the Prime Minister deceived veterans and their families. The Liberal Pension for Life scheme moves away from the one veteran, one standard model and takes $500 million away from veterans and their families. Mr. Speaker, why did the Prime Minister make a promise he knew he couldn't keep?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we are keeping our promises to veterans, which is something Conservatives never did. Our investments into veterans is the $10 billion new dollars, including delivering on our promise for a pension for life option. Now, because veterans are expected to take the $1,150 monthly tax-free payment for the rest of their lives rather than taking a lump sum up front, of course the budgetary costs are spread out over a longer time. We immediately increased financial support for veterans, increased mental health support, and are delivering on our promise to veterans.
The member for Barrie Innisfil.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as he stood in Belleville with his hand over his heart, the Prime Minister clearly had his other hand behind his back with his fingers crossed. Veterans and their families don't like being lied to or deceived. Will the Prime Minister admit that the Liberal Pension for Life scheme means no new money and in fact means less money for veterans and their families? And while he's at it, why doesn't he apologize to veterans for lying?
I encourage members to be careful and judicious in the choice of their words. Clearly, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when the Conservatives were in government, they tried to balance their budgets on the backs of veterans by cutting their services, by nickel and diming and disrespecting them every step of the way. I will take no lessons on how to treat our veterans with respect from those guys.
Order. The honourable member.
Come to order. 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 Honourable député de Drummond.
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, our employment insurance system is unjust towards the sick. In my riding, Cynthia Lafontaine, a young mother, was diagnosed with spinal cord cancer. After 15 weeks, she was penniless. Because of this government's inaction, Cynthia and many others are in a horrible situation. People don't recover from cancer in 15 weeks. Will the Prime Minister show some empathy and improve the EI system for the sick?
Please.
The Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, we have acted to improve the EI system so that it can respond to the needs of Canadian families. We brought in new measures for caregivers. We have simplified the claims process so that Canadians can get their benefits easily. Although the Conservatives don't seem to recognize the grave consequences of certain illnesses on Canadian families, we are improving the EI system.
Minister of Public Services keeps saying fixing the Phoenix fiasco is her #1 priority. My constituent went on mat leave, and thanks to Phoenix, her T4 slip says she is paid 4 times more than what she actually received. Canada Revenue Agency won't put a hold on her file, and as a result, she got a $14,000 tax bill and was forced to pay taxes on income that she never earned. She filed a complaint more than 7 months ago and was told no action has been taken. How can the Prime Minister think that this is acceptable?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we don't think this is acceptable. Canada's public servants deserve to be paid accurately and on time for their important work. Our government remains focused on stabilizing the Phoenix pay system and resolving these unacceptable issues, which continues to be our #1 priority. We have increased the capacity by 1,500 people at the pay centre. The backlog is down 100,000 cases since January 2015. Mr. Speaker, we didn't create this Phoenix problem, but we are going to fix it.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Lycée Lévis. Order, please. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister keeps talking about how he's helping veterans, but if you are a French-speaking veteran, good luck, because the Ombudsman for Veterans Affairs have to wait far longer. Even women have to wait an eternity. When will the Prime Minister stop treating Francophone veterans like second-class citizens? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will always defend access to services in both official languages, and it is unacceptable that Francophones do not get appropriate services when they need it. We will look into any problems there, and we will deal with it. We have invested $10 billion for veteran services. We have increased financial support for veterans and for their caregivers. We have established a continuum of services. We have opened offices for veterans that he and his government closed.
West.
Mr. Speaker, after meeting with over 150 businesses throughout Canada, the negative effect of the imposed steel and aluminum tariffs by the U.S. has become very evident. Companies are downsizing, some are closing, employees are being laid off and losing their jobs, thanks to the Liberals signing a bad deal. It is unfathomable that the Liberals would sign a deal with the U.S. without having these tariffs removed. Why would the Prime Minister sign a deal with the United States with steel and aluminum tariffs still in place?
Hear, hear. Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I just want to begin by thanking all Canadians of different parties for working together so diligently to demonstrate a united front as we negotiated the new NAFTA. This was something that across the partisan divide was so important that we did together, and we can all take credit for the security that we have in continued access to the U.S. market. But as I told the steel and aluminum workers on the floor of their plants, this government has their back. We always will.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, when we were negotiating directly with the Americans, the tariffs went up on steel and aluminum, and Quebec has been really affected by this. Could the Prime Minister have not dealt with this? It's 5 months that the tariffs are there. The agreement is signed and the tariffs are still there. Why will the Prime Minister not deal with the Americans? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said to workers in aluminum and steel, their government will protect them. Canadian countermeasures will remain in place until unjust customs rules are removed. During negotiations, we have always tried to create conditions that will help grow the middle class and offer more opportunities for Canadians. We will continue to work until these tariffs are removed, these customs problems are removed. That's what we told Canadians. That is what we will do.
Mr. Speaker, just last month, my colleague's private member's bill C-326, which focuses on drinking water guidelines in Canada, moved to the Senate for first reading. As members will know, decades of neglect have left drinking water systems on First Nation reserves in Canada in an unacceptable state. This is why our government is committed to ending long-term drinking water advisories on all public systems on reserve by March 2021. Can the Prime Minister please update this House as to the actions being taken to ensure reliable access to clean drinking water on reserves?
Prime Minister.
We'd like to thank the member from Thunder Bay Rainy River for his hard work and for his advocacy on this important issue. I'm pleased to share that as of today, 74 long-term drinking water advisories have been lifted, some of which have been in place for over a decade. We're making significant investments in improving water systems for water operator training and to ensure at-risk systems don't become long-term issues. We remain firmly on track to our commitment to lifting all long-term drinking water advisories on public systems on reserve by March 2021.
The Honourable Member.
The Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the Privy Council revealed that 73 people were aware of Liberal Cabinet secrets related to the delay of the Davie shipbuilding contract.
We know that several Liberal ministers and several Liberal MPs have real or perceived conflicts in that shipbuilding deal. This is in a government that has already seen several ministers and the Prime Minister found in ethical breaches. So, through you, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister be completely transparent, release the names of the 73 people who knew, or at least the names of the Liberal MPs on that list of 73?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the member well knows, it is improper to comment on this issue under the sub judice rule as the matter is before the court. This rule is a part of the law relating to contempt of court and also a convention recognized by this House. Members of Parliament are expected to refrain from discussing ongoing legal proceedings before the court. We respect this rule, as well as the law and rules that govern legal proceedings, including the handling of evidence, which will be dealt with before the court in due course on this case.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, when Rogers Communication decided to build a telecom tower on Notre-Dame West Street, opposition was immediate, and yet the company is going forward despite complaints by citizens and the refusal of the municipality. Although a range of solutions was proposed, consultations provided for in the legislation were only a farce. How is it that in 2018, the minister in charge can allow a telecommunication business, to impose its will despite the will of its citizens? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that people want high-speed internet throughout the country for economic growth, for the ability of our citizens to participate in job creation, and in the future, there are small businesses that are doing and acting this way in a way that is fair to citizens. The Honourable Member for Laval-Lézine. Mr. Speaker, we know that small business contributes to our economy, especially by exporting products. Before NAFTA negotiations, we listened to and consulted with small business. One of the main asks of small business was reducing red tape at the border. Can the Prime Minister inform the House of new measures in the new agreement that will benefit businesses directly with respect to this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I thank the Honourable Member for Laval-Lézine for his concern with small businesses in his riding. In our new agreement, there is a chapter on customs, on facilitating trade. New rules will reduce red tape at the border and will increase trade. This agreement will be beneficial for business and workers in Canada, including those in Laval-Lézine.
Mr. Speaker, for weeks, the Prime Minister claimed that there was absolutely nothing he could do about Tory Stafford's killer being placed in a healing lodge. He actually instructed his entire caucus to vote against a Conservative motion that spelled out the exact steps that he could take. Now that he has finally acted on this, will he do the right thing and apologize to the Stafford family for politicizing this issue? And will he apologize?
Order. Order. Alors, the Honourable leave that position with a few more seconds.
The Prime Minister actually went to great length to demonize anyone who had a problem with this, resorting to nasty name-calling and divisive language. Will he do the right thing and apologize?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our hearts go out to the family of Tory Stafford for the loss they endured. The Minister of Public Safety asked the Commissioner of the Correctional Service to review the transfer decision in question and their policies on offender transfers. Following that review, he has provided direction to improve transfer policies on medium security women offenders to facilities without a directly controlled perimeter. These changes will help ensure guilty parties are held accountable while fostering rehabilitation so we can have fewer repeat offenders, fewer victims, and ultimately ultimately safer communities.
Honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apropos of that last exchange, it's a shame Maclean's magazine didn't have a Hypocrite of the Year award for parliamentarians.
There are reasons, of course. Order. There are reasons why we have rules about on parliamentary language, because it leads to disorder of that sort. And so I would ask the member for Saanich Gulf Islands to withdraw the offending word. To be able to hear the member. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize unreservedly, and to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition as well. And I'd like to proceed to my question, if that's allowed, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Prime Minister is this. When the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report came out, it said that we had nothing that would block us from protecting life on Earth by achieving 1.5 degrees Celsius. The only missing ingredient is political will. So my question to the Prime Minister is, can Canada show that political will, go to COP24, committing that Canada will follow the pathway set out by the IPCC?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for her long-time advocacy towards environmental causes in Canada. We are the first generation to feel the impacts of climate change and the last generation to be able to stop it. We are working hard to meet our 2030 targets, and we know there will be more work to do after that. We are leading the Powering Past Coal Alliance with the United Kingdom. We have been a leader at COP since 2015 and will continue to play a leadership role in tackling climate change internationally.
Il y a eu des discussions